Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello, lovely listeners. How are you doing? I'm still riding high on the New Year buzz, and I hope that you're feeling super positive too. There's been some great feedback on last week's sewing goals for the New Year episode. Lots of you picked up some ideas and tips that are helping you think about the specifics of your goals, plus how to sew more sustainably in general. A listener named Cindy shared something with me related to the episode that I really want to pass on. So I was talking about in the episode how working out which of your existing garments see a lot of wear can help you decide which garments might or might not be worth making in the future. And I mentioned one method for doing that is to put all your clothes on one side of your wardrobe or clothing rail and moving it to the other side when you wear it. Then you can see really easily which items get worn and which don't. Cindy made the excellent point that those who lack wardrobe space, like myself, could turn their clothes hangers and garments round to face the other way to indicate that something's been worn instead. Thank you so much for that, Cindy. So I have been doing some sewing this week, but I'll talk about my current project next week because it's going to take a couple of weeks to complete. However, I would like to mention that I've written a blog post about one of the free sewing patterns that I mentioned in episode 14, the quick and cheap handmade gift project episode that I made on the run up to Christmas. I made a few dolls dresses using the Ellie & Mac School Cool Tunic and Dress pattern for dolls, which is an excellent pattern for a lot of reasons, not least because it's a wonderful use for scraps of jersey fabric. If you have any doll owners in your life, it is a really great resource, so I'll put a link to that blog post in the show notes. Oh my goodness, I have been making good moves sustainability-wise since the last episode, I am proud to report. I've been meal planning my socks off, plus batch cooking some meals that are suitable for portioning up so my husband can take them to work each day. Plus, he's been preparing himself overnight oats for the mornings, so he hasn't had to visit the local convenience shop that's near his workplace for a week. It's been a triple win because it means we are reducing food waste and the amount of plastic packaging from the shop-bought sandwiches and snacks he would have bought, and it's been saving us money. It definitely takes more brain space and more time spent cooking, but I'm hoping that some of it will become more habitual over time. Also, my daughter has grown out of some of her school uniform lately. I never buy new school uniform if at all possible, but the charity shops have not been very kind lately. But instead of rushing off to the shops or supermarkets this time, I've been on eBay and sourced the items she needs secondhand. Honestly, once the postage has been added, it's not going to be much cheaper, if at all, than buying new, but it's not creating a direct drain on virgin resources. Okay, so sorry, not sorry. Expect short but frequent food growing updates in the podcast intros throughout 2022. I'm delighted to report that my broad beans have started peeking through the ground. So I planted some broad beans in late November. I did that a couple of times before when I had an allotment and it worked really well. So when you do that in November, they come up during the winter, which gives you a bit of a morale boost and something to look at when the rest of your garment is pretty dormant. And then they're the first thing you can eat from your veg patch around May time, which in the UK is normally what's known as the hungry gap. And then they're done and dusted by the time you need the space for planting out other stuff. And it doesn't really matter if they all come at once because broad beans freeze really well as well. Now I just have to keep my fingers crossed that the insects and other living things don't take a shine to my plants before they're big and robust enough to look after themselves. This week, Check Your Thread has been blessed with new sign-ups of support from 4 beautiful humans. Enormous thanks to Carol, Helen, Angela and Rose. They want regular drops of Check Your Thread in their lives throughout 2022 and have signed up via Patreon to help make that happen. Please head to the show notes or the link on checkyourthread.com if you'd also like to help support the podcast. Right, this is episode 24, and I've been talking to the wonderful Rebecca Evans-Merritt. Rebecca is a maker that I've long admired for both her gorgeous and very wearable makes and her intelligent, thoughtful approach to making. Last year, she produced a talk for the Fold Line Sewing Weekender event entitled Slow and Conscious Making, where she outlined her definitions and philosophies and suggested how makers can improve the sustainability of their activities. Finally, I thought, a reason to get in touch with Rebecca and get her to talk to me. And that's what happened. In this conversation, we discuss those definitions of slow and conscious making and how her experience of vintage clothing helped her formulate them. We talk about both of our methods for planning our makes and how being particular about what she wears helps keep Rebecca on track with living out her values. But it's not all lofty ideals. We also get into the realities of slow and conscious making and what it looks like in real life and how it can get tricky. You'd think that given the subject matter that this would be quite a serious conversation, but it was actually so much fun to have. It's probably the episode that I've laughed the most whilst recording, and I had to cut out large chunks of audio because a lot of it was us shrieking. And I also cut out a chunk about a nightclub that it turns out we both used to go to when we were underage in the 90s. But that's a topic for another podcast. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this one. Here we go. Hello, Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Welcome to Check Your Thread.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Zoe.
Would you mind starting by telling us who you are, where you are, and what fills most your days?
I'm Rebecca Evans-Merritt. I'm based in East London and I love to sew. And I also work full-time as a learning support assistant at a college. So I work with young people with learning difficulties and help them to learn and have a nice time, which is very tiring, but I still try to fit sewing around it as much as I can.
So how did you get into sewing?
So I think I was about 15 and I was like very particular about what I wanted to wear. And I decided I was going to sew some flares because that's all I wore at the time. My mum can sew. She's not like massively into sewing, but she can sew. Like her mum used to make all of her and her sister's clothes like in the 70s and they were so amazing, like really cool outfits. And I will try to find some photos and get permission to put some on Instagram because the
please
clothes
do.
are so good and they were matching outfits.
Matching even better.
It's so good. So I think because like my mum grew up knowing all of that, she has the skills. But we had a sewing machine at home. She had like a bit of a fabric stash. So I got this blue corduroy and I was like, I'm going to make some trousers. So then I decided to yeah, of course. Just straight in there with trousers.
Wow, like not start with a cushion or a tote bag, no, trousers.
Yeah, trousers. Traced them off of an existing pair of jeans that I had, which was stretch fabric, which obviously didn't translate that well, but they did fit, like they could zip up, I could wear them standing up, it was fine.
I mean, that's a win.
Yeah, it's true. It's like they went on, they zipped up. That's
technically trousers.
Yeah. But, so that was good, and I was like, okay, I could do this. So then the next thing I made was my prom dress for prom.
Oh my goodness! And number 2, prom dress, of course.
Yeah. I think I went with my grandma to choose the fabric, and it's black satin. The dress is like bias cut. I don't even know how I cut this out. Like, I would hate to cut that sort of thing out now.
I wouldn't do that now. No. I love your bravery.
It went actually fine. I remember there was only one thing that I couldn't get my head around, and it was like the binding on the neck. I don't know. There was some sort of weirdness there, but other than that, like it was kind of okay.
So that was it. That was you. Like, yes, I can do this. No problems.
I think after that, like I didn't get straight into like just buying patterns and sewing garments. Yeah. I think I was more of a like DIY kind of person.
Well, it wasn't very inspiring, was it, in the 90s in terms of like what patterns were available and stuff?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also definitely nowadays, like the big four are better at like styling and stuff. But in those days, like some of the pictures are just like, what?
Yeah, and the fabric choices, so bad.
Yeah. So I went like, just like a more DIY route, I guess. And I used to use like old clothes and sheets and stuff and just like make dresses and like refashion things, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was all like really fun and it was quite chaotic. There wasn't any method to it. Because there were no rules.
No rules.
Yeah, exactly. And then when I was about like 18, and me and my sister got like really big into charity shopping and thrifting things. So I used to buy like random clothes and make them into something else. Like I had
Yeah.
this big batwing wool jacket and I turned it upside down and used like the waistband for a skirt, and then
Visionary.
Because, you know, it's like one of those like with the really little waist and like the massive batwing sleeve.
Yeah. Like, there's loads of volume here, just in the wrong place.
And then when I was at uni, I studied sculpture.
Did you?
And I started off. Yeah. So and like there weren't that many specific sculpture degrees around that time. Like they were a lot more like fine art, and I was like, no, I just definitely want to do sculpture. So I found a sculpture degree. I did that, and got completely like lost in it. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But then I realised that like I really love sewing. So by the end of my degree, I was just like doing loads of sewing and like sewing everything, which I really loved. But my tutors did not appreciate at all. They were like, what is this craft thing that you're doing?
Really? Oh, that's so interesting. Do you think it would be different if you were doing a similar degree course today? Do you think they'd be a bit more open to sewing medium?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it was also like partly me. Like I was much more into the making than like the concept. Like I just wanted to make something that was like really beautiful.
And they're like, yeah, but what does it mean?
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. And so I think after that that's when I really started getting into like sewing garments. Like I remember I made a little skirt for like my end of year show and stuff. But I think still at that time, I still wasn't really using patterns. I used to like just self-draft everything. I think I was much more like blasé about it. It's like,
sounded like it was working though.
Yeah, I guess so. And then when I was, how many years ago is this now? I'm trying to think. Maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, one of my friends worked at a fabric shop. Ooh. And she was like, oh, one of our tutors is, I think she was going on maternity leave or like was going to do something else. And she was like, oh, we need a tutor. Do you think you would like to do it? Because I know you sew. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. So then I ended up teaching sewing classes for a little bit, for like just under a year, I think. And that was really fun. And I think at that point, I really didn't know there was like a sewing community, because I remember her asking me once, like, oh, which sewing bloggers do you follow? And I was like, I don't know anything about that. Like, I was just like a standalone person. So I think from then I started to like kind of find out, oh, okay, there's like this sewing world out there and people blog about it. And then finding out about like indie patterns as well. Like I didn't really know anything about those before. And that was like a whole nother world. And then from there, it was just like my sewing just like took off to the next level. And got really into like indie patterns and different fabrics. Because I think, again, up to that point, I was still using like found fabrics or just like cheapy fabrics from, you know, the local shop. And like, I think that really helped me to think about the fabrics that I was choosing and like choosing better quality fabrics and nicer fibers and things like that.
Yeah. One of the kind of almost storylines I'm hearing through a lot of the people that I've been talking to for the podcast is when they suddenly then really get into sewing, they then go through this stage of like making all the things, you know, without thinking too much about maybe the suitability or the longevity or even the quantity necessarily of what they're making. Is that something that you would think would apply to you also?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent. I think definitely there was like a quilting cotton stage at some point. You know, like, I've always been like quite considerate about what I make. Generally, I'm trying to think if there was things that I've ever just made and then like never worn again. There was one time I made a dress to go to a wedding, and I made it like the night before, and it was up to 6 a.m. or something ridiculous. And then like fell asleep at the wedding ceremony. Like, well, I definitely never wore that dress again. Like it was like really just cheap floral fabric.
Oh, so many lessons learned.
I know, exactly. So
I love following you. As you know, I love following you on Instagram, and obviously I love the garments that you make. But beyond that, I've always found you to be like a really kind of considered and thoughtful maker. So I'm really looking forward to getting a bit more into that this morning. So you created a video earlier this year, which was for the Fold Line Weekender. Is that right?
Yeah, the sewing weekend.
Yeah, so I'm going to put it in the show notes for anyone that hasn't seen it, but in essence, it's about slow and conscious making. So would you mind telling us what your definition of that is? And is that kind of like your personal philosophy towards making and sewing?
Slow making to me is like literally going slowly, because so many of us rely on fast fashion and it's just kind of become the accepted way that things work. You just go to the shop, you buy whatever, you don't really think that much about it. You just go, oh, this is nice and cheap, and then you buy it and then you wear it a few times and then you go, oh, okay, I'm going to get something else. And a few years ago, I just went to this talk at like a festival, and it was about just like the kind of perils of fast fashion.
Right.
And I had been aware of some of these concepts before because I used to work in a vintage shop, and we used to get like big bales of clothes and then go through them and pick out the ones for vintage. So I knew there was lots of clothing waste in the world. Another thing that came out of working in vintage was I really appreciated like nice fibres.
Right.
Like I started to really think, oh, here's like the nice wool jumper that's like pure wool, and then here's this beautiful silk dress, and then you could see the more synthetic fibres and maybe they haven't worn so well or things like that. So yeah, I was kind of already kind of like opening myself up to these sorts of things, I guess. And then when I found out more about the fast fashion model and like how detrimental it is to the world and to people, and you know, once you it's like one of those things where once you've seen it you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of starting to see that. I was like, okay, well, some of these things I can sew. So I think it's always been important to me to just consider like what I'm making, and the only way that you consider really is like just literally slowing down, like just asking yourself questions before you do things. It's so easy to get caught up in just buying things or feeling like you need new things. And I mean, you know, that's just how like a capitalist society is. Like, so we're all born into this and like it's ingrained in us. So it's very difficult to kind of break that cycle and go, actually, what I'm doing, what does that mean? Like what effect does that have on the world? And what effect does that have on other people?
So if you've had an idea for a project that you'd like to make, how do you know if that idea is worth pursuing and actually going ahead with?
I mean, I'm a real procrastinator. So I think between like having the idea and actually making the thing, there's a long time.
That's like a natural filter.
Yeah, exactly. But I think like questions that I would ask myself, I guess, would be, what can I wear it with? So I think that's always important.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
So I think there are still, you know, some things where you make it because you just want to make it. But I think if you could ask, how am I going to wear this? How does this work for my life? Like, what situations can I wear this in? And just try to make sure that it kind of can fit into a number of different scenarios. And also like thinking about what fabrics you're going to use, suitability to the project.
How does spontaneity factor into your making?
It still does. Like I'd say with fabric, not so much, because I think I still like to just think about fabric. So I generally try to avoid like getting caught up in like, oh gosh, this new fabric's out and I must get it right now. I kind of think, okay, like if it's still there in the week,
right,
and I still am thinking about it, then maybe I'll buy it. And with patterns as well, I love Instagram for seeing what patterns are out there. But also, again, it is very easy to get caught up in like, oh my gosh, this pattern's out, I must get it. So again, I would try to be like, okay, let's just give it a bit of time, see what other people make, and then, you know, have a think.
Yeah, I love doing that because you can get so many good ideas, can't you? And maybe some fabrics you hadn't thought of, or the way that people wear the garment in a different combination. Exactly. It can be really inspiring, can't it?
For sure, exactly.
So do you tend to maybe like see a pattern you really like, you get the pattern and then you buy the fabric, or is it more like, I want to make a certain type of garment and then you gather the things for that?
I wouldn't say there's one method. Like sometimes we'll see some fabric and I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I definitely want that fabric, but won't have a plan for it.
Right.
But I'd say that happens less now. I'd say now I'm much more, I think I go kind of from like the concept of the garment. So I think I want something a bit like this, and then I'll find like a pattern that will work and then the fabric that will work. because I don't do sketches or anything. Like, I think in my head I'm a terrible drawer, so I really like try to avoid sketching anything.
Except the fine artist.
I know. Yeah. So I just literally just write in my notes, like it'll be like a jumpsuit with a zip. Maybe it could have a big collar, and like you'll just like this stream of consciousness.
I love it. A stream of consciousness planning. That's so good. I mean, whatever words.
And then I like to, like, so it has a little checkbox, and then when I've made it, I'll put a tick, and then I'll put like the date when I made it, and like I'll put extra notes as to what was actually made.
That's a good. I write everything as well. I use the app Trello.
Oh yeah.
And I've got it's ridiculous, but I love playing with it. You know, when you're tired and stuff, and you're not actually sewing. I've got like a list of all the fabrics that I've got in my stash, and I've got a list of some of the patterns that I own, and then I've got a list of like project ideas, and then if those projects have then been elevated to something I'm actually going to make, then I've got a list of, if I've like got everything I need, it moves over to there. And then
oh my gosh, this sounds so organised.
It's kind of slightly creepy sounding now I say it out loud. But then I've got then the next is if I've prepped the pattern, because that's for me is such a big thing. That takes so long if you want to make any alterations or trace it off and so on and so forth. So that's a big thing. And then if I've cut it out, I move it over. Because that's another thing. That's like a whole evening sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's true.
And then if I've started it, I move it over. And then if I've finished it, I move over. And then if I've taken some photos, I move it over. Is that kind of creepy? I would say I'm worried it's quite
not at all. Like, that's like a dream. I wish I was that organised.
It's so fun. And then it's quite good because I can write down my ideas, the project ideas, and then they're just there. And then I can go back, you know, a month or however long later and think, do I still want that? Or do my kids still even need that? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I definitely like cross things off of my list. I'm like, I'm never going to make that. Let's just cross that off. But I still keep it there. Like I literally put like a strike through. Just in case.
Do you? But that's interesting, isn't it? To see like your thought process and maybe how your style has evolved possibly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. And also something that has seemed so important at the time, like I must make this garment. And I was like, I don't care about that at all.
So you seem to have a really defined personal style. So has it always been like that?
I guess so. Like, I think I've just always been quite particular. I don't know, I just call it being particular about what I want. Like, when I was a teenager, I went through phases. Like, I think there was like a hippie phase, and I only wore wide leg trousers and like flowers in my hair or whatever. And, you know, it wasn't necessarily to do with like what other teenagers were wearing. It's just like, this is what I'm going to wear.
That's so good though. So where did you get your inspiration from then if it wasn't necessarily what your friends were doing?
I don't know. Me and my best friend Abigail, we were quite like, we were in our own world. So we were really into teenage magazines, very much so. So there was definitely like style from there. But we just were doing our own thing.
Oh, I love that so much. You and Abigail. That's so sweet.
She's still my best friend. And we used to like predict trends. And one time we predicted that 3/4 length sleeves were going to come in. Like they weren't a thing. And we were like, what about if you had sleeves that were like 3/4 lengths? And then they came in.
I've said it before. I'll say it again. You're a visionary.
Like it wasn't like way out there. We weren't like really extreme in what we wore, but we were both like quite particular.
Yeah. It really reminded me of my friend Anna, like in sixth form, she'd bring like copy of The Face magazine. So during lunch break, we'd like look through in this like little suburban sixth form, you know, in Essex. We'd be like, looking at all these styles of like what people were wearing in London, you know. And then we'd get off the bus in town on the way after college, and then we'd go and buy some like rubbish clothes from the charity shops. And then we'd like, you know, refit them and remake them and stuff, and then wear them to the club at the weekend. And like you, we were like slightly outliers. Like we'd get these office skirts and then like fit them so they were like kind of slinky, like knee-length skirts at a time when everyone was wearing short skirts. Loads of people would be looking at us like, what are you wearing? You look so frumpy. We're like, no, you don't know. This is what they wear in The Face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that sounds very similar. We were also in Essex doing the same thing.
So it's good to hear that, although you are a very kind of slow and conscious maker, that you do occasionally have failed projects. But your ratio of fails to non-fails is probably pretty good.
Yeah, it's true. Like there's not that many fails.
But it's a good learning opportunity as well, isn't it? As long as you don't repeat that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
So any fails that you have, does it tend to be around style choices or maybe like inappropriate fabric or all of the above?
I'm trying to think what my recent fails have been. So yeah, there's definitely like the big collar blouses.
Yeah.
Like I made one of those and I think I've worn it twice.
Oh, really?
I can already tell I'm probably not going to wear it again.
So from what I can tell via Instagram, you wear a kind of a mix of like handmade items and thrifted items. So what's your ratio of your wardrobe really, like handmade to thrifted to ready to wear, would you say?
I have no clue. Like my wardrobe is out of control.
Is it?
Because I worked in vintage for so many years, like I call it being a collector of clothes.
Right, okay.
Not hoarding, it's collecting. I've got basically 2 wardrobes and a giant chairdrobe situation.
Ah, chairdrobe, I like it.
So basically all I do in the week is wear the chairdrobe and then at the weekend I'm like, what's in the wardrobe? So I have never done like a proper inventory of what I own. I've got so many clothes, but I'd say most of them are probably thrifted or like secondhand.
Right.
And then, I don't know, I'd say maybe ready to wear and me made might be similar now because I haven't shopped ready to wear like new in years. So that is definitely...
That's dwindling. Yeah. Because I mean, I had never asked that question I never think of it in the terms of like, well, I think everyone should have 100% me made by any stretch, because as I've mentioned loads of times before, I don't think that making your own clothes is necessarily the most sustainable way to dress. I just find it really fascinating, like how people blend their wardrobes with what elements and how that evolves over time as well.
Yeah, I just think with anything, you don't want to put pressure on yourself to have a completely me-made wardrobe or whatever.
Yeah, completely. Especially if it is your escape and it's your creativity after a long week.
Exactly, yeah. And I think also there's some things that maybe you just don't want to sew. I mean, I've really got into sewing underwear like the past year, but I know for some people they like have no inclination to do that at all, which is absolutely fine. But
completely.
You don't have to sew everything if you don't want to.
Yeah. So in terms of fabric choices, so like what fabrics do you like to sew with and where do you buy your fabric from?
So I realised that I really like to sew with very structured fabrics. Oh, actually, you say this, but I also am happy to sew with jerseys and that sort of thing. So I'm fine with jerseys and I'm fine with like something with a structure, like a nice woven, but I really don't like to sew like slinky fabrics.
Right, so viscose is out.
Definitely out. Like anything that moves too much. And then also I just realised like the clothes that I wear and am drawn to are generally more structured anyway.
And generally like you have to do a lot of ironing when you have lots of viscose and tencel. I wouldn't work with your chairdrobe.
It would not.
So what does your fabric stash look like?
I try to really think about the fibres that are in the fabric. So I much prefer to use natural fibres because bigger by the end, then the garment is like that bit more friendly to the environment and biodegradable, although you do need to think how the fabric's been dyed because that can affect biodegradability and things like that.
But that's so hard to find that information out, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It is. I don't even know what the best resource is for finding that sort of stuff out. So I think find out what you can about it and just do what you can. I mean, like anything that's a natural fibre is going to be obviously like that bit better for the environment than like a completely synthetic fibre. So if you can make that choice, then do. But then, on the other hand, there's always, but if you make it in a synthetic fibre, maybe it washes better and lasts longer than a natural fibre. So there's always like all of these things that you can weigh up. There's a lot.
Yeah, I often think about in terms of denim, for example, like if you made some jeans, for example, that were 100% cotton, that's awesome. But then maybe you're not going to wear them as much as ones that have got some stretching because, that's going to be a bit more comfy. So you kind of think, well, is it worth making a pair of trousers that I'm probably not really going to reach for? Or the ones that I'm going to wear all the time because they're really comfy? There's a lot to weigh up, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's like, I guess you've just got to go with what works for you.
Yeah.
But I think definitely like wearability is a key factor, because like if you're making something that you know that you're going to wear and you're going to love it, then that's kind of like the best solution, I guess, because yeah, there's no point in like making a load of clothes and then being like, oh, actually I don't wear any of them, and then like maybe you have to go and buy something that you will wear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that you can wash easily. And
so what do you do with your handmade garments when you no longer want them?
So I've taken some to clothing swaps, because then I always feel like someone will definitely take it home. And
Yeah,
home.
No, that's such a good idea, because I was feeling a little bit like, are they going to want the thing that I made? Do you know what I mean? I think we often as makers, we really kind of question the legitimacy or somehow of the things that we make in comparison to ready to wear, which I don't know why. Yeah. It's ridiculous, but
yeah, it's so true. Yeah, so I take them there. I pass them on to friends, you know, if there's something that I think they might like. But yeah, it is tricky because where I work is a charity and we have a charity shop. So I've worked in like the back of the shop and kind of have seen, you know, how many things get ragged and just sent to who knows where, probably wash up on a beach in Africa or something. And it's just like, oh, and it's so I think before I knew about what happens in charity shops, I think I would be like, oh, just take it to the charity shop.
Yeah.
But it's not that simple. Like,
no, it's true.
So I think it's always preferable to give it to someone than to just think that you can give it to the charity shop and then it's like this magic. Oh, and then it's, you know,
check me out, I'm so good. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not always that straightforward. Like not everything that you donate will get sold to someone. I saw this charity called Give Your Best.
Right.
Which looks amazing. And I think it's a bit like eBay, so you kind of have to be responsible for posting your things to the person. But I think the concept is that you take photos and then they'll upload it to their site, and then refugees can choose the clothes. And then like you're responsible for posting it to them. But it just sounds like a really great way to do it, because then you know that someone's getting it and you know that it's going to be appreciated.
I'm going to check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, so I've got like a bag of stuff, but one day I will organise myself.
But presumably, you have to like measure it and take photos and stuff.
Yeah.
So what about sustainability in other aspects of your life? So are there other ways that you apply the kind of slow and conscious principles to reduce your environmental impact?
So I really do try to be conscious just generally in life. Like, so I have some of my mum friends run a company called Sunny Jar Eco Hub, and they started it mid to when we kind of like became friends. So I've kind of seen their journey, and they're really like low waste living and stuff. And that really just spurred me on to kind of start to live more low waste. But yeah, I do try to avoid single-use plastic, definitely as much as possible. Like I try to take my lunch into work. I've got like a cutlery roll that I always have. Yeah, it's just being a bit more mindful of what we consume and how much we're consuming.
So which makers or businesses related to sewing and sustainability do you find inspiring?
So one that quite blows my mind is Alexis from Fibre Cloth Studio. So I think she has some patterns out now, but she like sews by hand. Like
I just discovered her. Yes.
Yeah, I just find her like really cool and inspiring. There's another maker on Instagram, Monica. I think hers is Slow Ritual Studio.
Right.
So she makes like beautiful things in like, you know, beautiful natural fabrics. But she made this quilted jacket, and it's all sewn by hand again, and it's just like amazing. It's so amazing. So they're my main two really. But I think on Instagram, it really does feel like people are kind of quite open to sustainable sewing, and it does feel like it's a conversation that people are having a lot more now. And I think like New Craft House do the Sew Yourself Sustainable.
Yeah.
And that was really nice to see what people are doing, and also different ways that people are bringing sustainability into their sewing. So yeah, following that hashtag is helpful as well. It's nice that people are starting to question where fabrics are from, and also like the pace of their sewing.
Yeah.
I find it quite funny when I like come across like just a random account, and then it's very much like, oh, I bought this fabric and I'm making this thing, and I bought this fabric and I'm making this thing, and I'm like, oh wow, there's still people that do this. Like,
really? We're still doing this?
Actually, I had the time. But it's nice to know that there's also a community that are slowing down and being a bit more.
Yeah. Sometimes you see people and they're like, I love this pattern. I've made 6. Wow. 6 of the same thing.
Exactly. I think that's like a key thing. It's like, you have to say, do I need this in my life? Am I going to wear this? Is this realistic? And then, like, if you can answer yes to those questions, then go ahead and make it. But 6 of one thing, you probably don't need.
Oh, Rebecca, this has been so much fun, and it's been such a lovely opportunity to get to talk to you in real life. So thank you so much for giving me some of your morning today.
Oh, thank you, Zoe. It's been a joy.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!